Thursday the 12th of March and Hooky's back. He's missed the beginning of Mad March, but he's quickly up to speed with what's been going on in sport across South Australia. In this episode, Ben shares his perspective on playing the Sheffield Shield at Adelaide Oval. He takes us back in time when there were no Shield finals, looks at local cricket and gives us a rundown on last Monday's Adelaide Cup. He's refreshed and ready to get into Hooked on Sport. Welcome back, Hooky.
Wallace, yeah, g'day. I am back. Yes, had a couple of weeks off, and I think you've been madly peddling some of our very, very old stuff in the meantime, but it's nice to be back live and chatting and talking about everything that's going on. Of course, footy coming to its rapid opening. Port Adelaide and the Crows both doing battle this weekend against Collingwood and St Kilda respectively, and there's so much to talk about with cricket as well. So, yeah, a lot to get off my chest, I suppose.
Great. Well, it's good to see you back and great that you had a nice break. Now, the Sheffield Shield Final looks increasingly like it'll be at Adelaide Oval. Are you, the cricket tragic between us, ecstatic about that?
Oh, I don't know if I'm ecstatic. I'm very happy about it, Wallace. I'd say I feel like I've won Division 2 of Cross Lotto. You know, it's you've won about $1,000. That's always a good thing, but you've fallen short of the $1 million that would make you ecstatic. I am a little bit bemused that all of a sudden this time around we feel the need for that it has to be played at Adelaide Oval. I mean, we have known for a number of years now that this is football season at Adelaide Oval. And I'm I'm just well aware of the fact that the redevelopment happened in 2014. I think the cutoff date where the ground switches from cricket to football is March 15. And 2015-16, South Australia was the top team at the end of the minor round of the Sheffield Shield. And we played Victoria in the Sheffield Shield Final. And that was played at Adelaide Oval, a venue that Saka at the time poured a lot of money into for it to be brought up to standard as a potential alternative first-class venue. The attention seems to have moved on to Karen Rolton Oval now. Glenelg Oval hasn't been used for a first-class or a top-line cricket game outside of Premier cricket for, I reckon, about 5 or 6 years. And we never bothered about thinking that this needed to be moved back to Adelaide Oval back then. And I'm interested in why there seems to be such a strong push for that now. This is in part cricket's own doing here, Wallace. I mean, we've signed up to deals to be sharing grounds. The cutoff point is the middle of March, but we have a very, very long and only expanding cricket season. The BBL has in large part been responsible for that. I can recall in 2008, 2009, the Sheffield Shield Final was finished by about the 17th or 18th of March. And now here we are pushing right into the fourth week. And sometimes it even doesn't finish until April. So there's always going to be a crossover. There's always going to be some challenges. And it is interesting that we sort of feel this absolute necessity to play at Adelaide Oval this time around. I mean, I hope it happens, but there are going to be some compromises that come with it.
Let's have a listen to what the Premier had to say this morning on 5AA.
Premier, just finally, we're expecting a positive announcement about the location of the Sheffield Shield Final at the Adelaide Oval. Can I just ask, though, have any of the codes, cricket or footy, have they asked the state government to pay any cash to get the Shield match to the Adelaide Oval?
Well, the honest answer to that question is yes, we have received a request. It's not from cricket. I won't say what entity it is within footy.
Well, wouldn't logic suggest that it's the Adelaide Football Club?
And what I would say is we're asking for people to act rationally and pragmatically in the interest of fans. The South Australian government has already shown an awful lot of support to both footy clubs locally, and particularly the Adelaide Footy Club, which has done very well from the support that we've provided them to be able to see through the issues at Thebarton. We've backed them in every step of the way. Even
That's a bit audacious, isn't it? Is that a bit audacious at Adelaide?
I've got to say, I think it's a little bit galling that people are trying to use an opportunity to look after fans as an opportunity to slug the taxpayer, and I won't be having it.
Hooky, what do you make of that?
Yeah, gee, fascinating, wasn't it, Wallace? I do feel like that question was planted by the Premier's office to Penbo, just the way it was asked. I was watching the vision of it as well, and the way it was answered suggested to me that it was a push from the Premier's office, and the Premier knew it was coming. He was determined to fire a warning shot what appears to be against the Adelaide Crows, who understandably, in my opinion, have some pushback over whether this is a good idea to be playing a Sheffield Shield final at the Adelaide Oval in between the weeks of 2 AFL games. So it did feel like there was, some sort of meddling going on behind the scenes in order to get this out there before it becomes potentially an even bigger issue. I mean, I have to be honest, as much as I do want to see the Sheffield Shield final at Adelaide Oval, I do feel a little bit for the Adelaide Football Club here, and maybe that's a different opinion to what some people thought I might have. But the Crows have got the most to lose. I mean, it's their week to train there. That's gone. So you lose a competitive advantage. The quality of the surface that they're going to be playing on Sunday could potentially be compromised. I mean, I feel like it's the bloke who is your next door neighbour and he comes around and asks if he can borrow your mower and he returns it back a week later with no petrol in it and the blades are blunt, you know. I mean, I'd like to think that things will work out better for the Adelaide Crows than that, but I can understand that that is their fear. I mean, the other thing is there's a lot of effort that goes into organising a venue across each week, and they've got the rights to the venue for this week. I mean, they'll be decorating the ground in club colours. There's merchandising to go up. There's signage. I imagine there are many, many issues that we haven't even considered about what it takes to get a ground ready for an Adelaide Football Club home game, and when it's going to be a Sheffield Shield Final cricket venue for pretty much all of that week. I do think that there are some issues that the Adelaide Football Club is rightly putting up their hand and saying, well, hang on, you know, it's not as simple as us just moving out the way for you and then turning up on Sunday and playing an AFL game of football. There's a heck of a lot more to it than that. So I hope it works, but I am well aware of the concerns that the Adelaide Football Club would have. And I do recall Tim Silvers, actually, I think it was also on 5AA about 6 or 7 weeks ago when this first cropped up. And he said, well, would cricket move off their venue for a weekend if we had to host an AFLW grand final? I think that's probably a legitimate question. Would you want all of the pitches coming out and putting all of the normal surface back in just for one AFLW football game? That would be an interesting question that I don't know the answer to either. So, yeah, I do have some empathy with the Adelaide Football Club. Hope it works out, but get where they're coming from.
So what are the concessions the game will have to make for it to be played at Adelaide Oval?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. I don't think even the great Damien Hoff, the head groundsman at Adelaide Oval, could absolutely guarantee that the surface that'll be prepared outside of Adelaide Oval and then moved into the ground on Sunday is going to be perfect for play on Monday. And the other obvious compromise that we'll have to make is that the length of grass for an outfield in a cricket match is very, very fine. The ball rolls over it quite quickly and quite smoothly. It's a very different cut for AFL football. Now, I imagine at the start of the week, they may be able to cut it a couple of mil lower, but there's no way the Crows are going to accept turning up on Sunday and the height of the cut on the outfield is half the length that what it traditionally would be as well. They would expect that the ground is returned to the full length. So that's going to make it, I think, quite a slow outfield over the course of the week. And that will be, a compromise that you wouldn't see at another venue. In all of this, Wallace, and this was, I guess, my big concern 10 years ago when we were moving from Football Park and we weren't going to go to a new stadium in Adelaide that was, at the time, the opposition had floated up the idea of building some sort of Docklands type stadium on top of the old rail yards, which is where the new Women's and Children's Hospital is going to go now. That was earmarked as the venue by the then opposition for it to become a very modern stadium, and Adelaide Oval would stay what it was. This is always the compromise when you go to one venue as a shared venue across a big capital city like Adelaide, is you have these challenges. And people back then should have seen this coming rather than starting to wail now that it's not fair or, on both sides. This was always an inevitability I could have seen.
So do you like the Sheffield Shield final concept?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question you pose, because the Sheffield Shield's been going for about 130 odd years. And for the first 100 of them, we didn't have a Sheffield Shield final. It was just whichever team was on top at the end of the minor round was the winner of the Sheffield Shield. And that being, if that was the case now, then South Australia would already have won the 2024-25 Sheffield Shield. And they would be lifting the trophy at Karen Rolton Oval at the end of their game against Queensland, which begins here on Friday. And it's a bit of a confected idea. I don't think there's any such thing where long-form cricket has handled a final as such particularly well. So when it first came in 82, 83, ironically after South Australia won it in 81, 82, it was essentially pitched as a way for first-class cricketers to get the experience of playing a mock test match. It was over 5 days. It had a little bit more riding on it, of course, but that was the way it was pitched rather than as we need a better way of determining who is the best team throughout the year. So what the rules up until 2018-19, Wallace, were that if you were the home team and you managed to play out a draw over 5 days, then you won the Sheffield Shield. And in 2018-19, that rule changed. And it's now basically done on bonus points in the first innings, which I find very, very surprising to me, having only looked up these rules in the past couple of days. So I'll just share with you what I think can happen. South Australia could win the toss and bat first, and after 100 overs be 7 for 260 and go on and get 380. Let's say we're playing New South Wales, and in reply, they're 7 for 265 after 100 overs and get all out for 290. South Australia in their second innings could make 450. And then New South Wales are 9 for 60 in the final innings, miles behind in the game, and it rains. And New South Wales, under my understanding of the way the rules work, would be awarded the Sheffield Shield. Now, in a situation where South Australia has won 3 more games than any other state this year, if that was the way that you lost the Sheffield Shield, I think that would be completely incongruous with the way the competition's played. So what am I saying? It's a very long form of saying that I don't absolutely love the Sheffield Shield. I mean, it'd be great to have it here in Adelaide. It'd be great if South Australia goes on and wins it. It would be unprecedented for South Australia to win a one-day and a Sheffield Shield title in the same year. But yeah, there are some issues around a Sheffield Shield final, and I hope I've given enough of an understanding of what they are. But it's not my favourite game of cricket. There's been some bloody terrible games of Sheffield Shield finals as well. I mean, they've been played on dead set roads, and you know the team that has been the home team, if they've won the toss and batted first and scored 700 in the first innings, well, it just ruins the game for the next 3.5 days.
So there's still one round to go, as you said. Can you explain the incredible form of the SA men's cricket team?
No, quite frankly, Wallace, I can't. There is a saying that madness is defined by doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And South Australia have almost put the lie to that saying, haven't they? Because they really haven't done a heck of a lot different this year to last year. But the results, the outcomes are just remarkably different. I mean, they've added this year Jason Sanger to the Sheffield Shield team and both Sanger and Mackenzie Harvey to the one-day team. I mean, that isn't wholesale changes. And those guys have been good, but they haven't been redefining the way South Australia has played their cricket. So it just goes to show to me that it's not the who, it's the how. That so long as you've got personnel you're comfortable with, it's how you play that really determines what goes on here. And I'm also reminded that this has taken an absolute village in South Australian cricket. It's not just one or two people coming in that have had this profound effect. I think it's a lot of people that have had a profound effect. So let's start with the coach, Ryan Harris. In his playing career, Wallace, he was maybe one of the most underrated guys going around, and he ended up, an injury-riddled career. But I think he played 27 tests and had finished with a test average of under 24. It's pretty incredible. And the thing I'd say about Ryan, and I'm looking forward to catching up with him over the next couple of weeks and just talking about it, but I can recall facing him quite regularly in Premier cricket, or grade cricket it was known back then. And he was a nice bowler, but he was pretty gentle, he bowled just pretty friendly medium paces. And you always felt like he probably had another yard in him, but he never seemed to want to extend himself. And I don't know what it was, whether it was just someone instilling a bit of self-belief in him that he could bowl quite a bit faster and a bit more aggressively. And I do remember, I reckon it was the last year before he went to Queensland, and he bowled a spell to me. We were playing in a semi-final, I think it was, at Park 25, and it was yards faster. It was appreciably more difficult to face. And it was almost like he had just flicked the switch. Someone had said to him, "You're better than this, go out and demonstrate it." And he demonstrated, and of course went on and had this incredible career for Australia. And I do feel like that he's had a similar effect on the guys in the team now. They've all been good players who can sort of hold their own, but now they're really standing up and performing admirably and driving South Australia to wins. I mean, 6 wins in 9 games is pretty incredible in the current structure of Sheffield Shield. So I think Ryan Harris deserves his own plaudits. I've got to talk about his club as well, Wallace, Northern District Cricket Club, which has been a little bit maligned in recent years. It's been one of the struggling clubs. They've been in Division 2. It looks probably like they'll be stuck in Division 2 again for a third year next year, unless a miracle happens in the grade or the Premier competition this coming weekend, and we can maybe just talk about that. But Ryan Harris is there. Sean Watt from Northern Districts is there. Mark Cosgrove from Northern Districts is an assistant coach, and so is Stephen Crook, who grew up playing his junior cricket there, spent some time at East Torrens as well. But these guys are all from the northern suburbs of Adelaide, and they have combined to put together this quite incredible coaching group. And I think that's something that I would just take just a little tick alongside as well for that club, the Jets, and what they've delivered in coaching to South Australian cricket's quite impressive. I've got to talk up the current board and its CEO. So Will Rayner is the president of South Australian Cricket, and Charlie Hodgson, the CEO. I do think the way that they stuck out their jaw to Cricket Australia when the scheduling around the Adelaide Oval Test was going to be compromised, and they stood up to them. They said they were going to take the SCG time slot just after New Year, and really made a song and dance about how South Australian cricket deserves some respect for what it is on the national landscape. And now the Adelaide Test really has become the icon of the summer. I mean, I know that Melbourne likes to talk up its Boxing Day Test, but you start to give Adelaide Oval some public holidays alongside of the slot that it already holds. I mean, you could fill it 2 times over every day, Adelaide Oval, couldn't you? So I do think that that's been a big win, that we've got this board that is prepared to stick its neck out for the good of South Australian cricket. And I reckon that trickles down all through the organisation, that we deserve a bit more respect. And I think that's been significant. I also want to just touch on the immediate past president, Andrew Sinclair. He was the previous president. He did a remarkable job in a difficult time for South Australian cricket, oversaw a lot of the redevelopment after Ian McLaughlin finished his tenure. But he was the one who really just said, hang on, South Australian cricket's been terrible for a long time, no more. And he brought in the Hussey Review that had mixed reviews itself at the time, but he was very, very strong with his messaging about what are we going to do to get South Australian cricket back up to the top. And I think the origins of what he started, there are a lot of other people who've built on ever since, and that's been extremely successful. And I do want to talk up Jason Gillespie and Tim Nielsen as well. I mean, they are largely responsible for recruiting the group that we have now and how successful they have been, and the evenness of performance that we're seeing now. So Wallace, and I'm probably just rabbiting on, there's a bit of a monologue here, but I'll just get a couple of points off my chest. We have only one player in the top 12 for most runs in the Sheffield Shield competition this year. Hard to believe for a team that's 3 games ahead on top. That's Henry Hunt, who sits 5th. And we only have one player in the top 12 for most wickets in the competition. That's Nathan McAndrew with 32. We've got Brendan Doggett, who's 13th with wickets, and Jake Lehman, who's 13th with runs. So that just shows to me the evenness of the performance, that everyone is doing their bit. Everyone's playing a pretty incredible role. One other guy I'll single out is Simon Inslee, and I'm going to ask you this question, Wallace, and I'll ask all of our listeners as well. Who is Simon Inslee?
It's a great question, Hooky.
Yeah, well, I don't think anyone would know who Simon Inslee is, but he's the high performance director who has replaced Tim Nielsen. And, you know, I'm a big Tim Nielsen fan. I'll put that right up in lights. But Simon Inslee, completely behind the scenes, doing everything completely underground, never once does a press conference, never once trumpets his own horn, has been very, very masterful behind the scenes in just raising the high performance standards around South Australian cricket over the course of the year. You wouldn't know him if you bumped into him in the street. I've had a bit to do with him. He's not awe-inspiring, but he is inspiring. You know, he's just one of these lovely guys who you can tell is very comfortable in what his beliefs are and how he can portray them to the rest of the group. And I think he has very quietly had an extremely profound influence right across South Australian cricket. So And look, I'm not trying to slight these guys, but, Adam Kelly, you see a lot of at the Adelaide Crows. Chris Davies, you see a lot of at the Port Adelaide Football Club as the head of the football programs, respectively. Simon Inslee just is a complete unknown. I'm not saying that that's right or wrong, but it's just a very, very different approach. And, he'll probably be ringing me up saying, don't talk me up. It's nothing to do with me. But I think what he has done for South Australian cricket behind the scenes has been quite incredible.
So, Hooky, moving on to the local cricket wrap, what has caught your eye in local circles?
Yeah, well, we've got a couple of emerging new superstar clubs, teams that perhaps weren't quite so much on my radar this time last year. So the Sturt Cricket Club in the men that were in Division 2 last year, won it pretty comfortably, to be fair. They're now comfortably top of Division 1, and that would be a story if they win Division 2 and go on and win Division 1 the exact same season. And I reckon we did a podcast maybe about 12 weeks ago where we talked up Kensington Cricket Club and their coach and captain, which is Jamie Pinelli and Sarah Lowe. They have just limped into third position this year, and it's really all about Glenelg, who beat Sturt pretty comfortably on the weekend and has finished the minor premier as well. So I think in women's cricket, we're likely to see Sturt and Kensington play the preliminary final, if you like, to meet Glenelg in the final. And they look like they come into that with pretty good form, pretty good shape. Some of their young kids are starting to develop a bit. They've got a young spinner, Lucy Bowering, who I really like as a young off spinner. And Courtney Webb will come back into that team, who's a star of the South Australian team. So I really think Glenelg could go on and win their first premiership despite a couple of close run falls in recent years. And then, Sturt, very, very exciting in Division 1. Just they've really dominated all comers, which is a bit of a surprise when you think about where they were only 18 months ago. The other thing I'm interested to see is how Division 2 plays out for the men. I think East Torrens are definitely through. The team that's in second place at the moment, Wallace, is the Saka under-19s. I mean, it's a bit like, Norwood being top 4 in the AFL. I mean, it's remarkable. I thought that might have been a tough sell to get those kids to continue to sort of strive, because they don't. My understanding is this: they won't play finals even if they finish second, and that the third place team will go on and play a final against East Torrens, considering East Torrens is going to finish top. But both of those two teams go back up into Division 1. So how the Saka under-19s have sort of done it without really anything to play for is pretty incredible. So, a lot to play out. And of course, we've got a Bradman, a Sincock and a Rolton medal to present in about 2 weeks' time.
So Adelaide Cup was held last Monday. Another female jockey on the rise in SA.
Yeah, I was at the races on Monday, Wallace. I'd only been in Australia 24 hours, so I was tired as I was working my way through the mounting yard presentations and a couple of functions. I did make the point at the start of the race day, of the 14 horses in the field, 5 of them were going to be ridden by South Australian women jockeys. One of them was unfortunately scratched on the morning. That was Gotta Go Guru, who was going to be rid by Taylor Johnston, and Taylor Johnston actually won the subsequent race in the day, which was a huge thrill for her to win a listed race. But the Adelaide Cup ended up being contested by 4 women straight out of the South Australian Apprentice Jockeys Academy. So Jamie Mellum, who was previously Jamie Carr and is pretty much a household name here now, alongside Tegan Vorum, Kayla Crowther and Rochelle Milnes. It was won by Silent Sorrente. Rochelle Milnes was aboard that horse. She's the reigning Apprentice Ducks of the year. So she's still a claiming apprentice, but can't claim in these sorts of races. So the advantage you have as an apprentice is you can take 2 kilos off your horse, or whatever your claim currently is. But you don't get to do that in these black type events, you see. So she rode at the full weight and her horse didn't get a great run, and she eventually had to take it to the front and somehow managed to hold it on. So Silent Sorrente for Nicky O'Shea and Will Clark, and very, very impressive performance. But I just thought it was worth highlighting what the women in particular are doing in South Australian horse racing. So as I said, 5 South Australian women out of 14 riding in that race. She becomes the 3rd South Australian woman to have won the Adelaide Cup in recent years. Jamie Carr's won it previously, as has Claire Lindop. the women in the Apprentice Academy are doing pretty remarkable things. 14 of them, since it was first won in 1989 by Michelle Lavars, have gone on to become ducks. 4 of those women have won it twice. There's only one male who's won it twice in that same period. Women have won 12 of the last 18 Academy Ducks awards. So that just goes to show their dominance. And then South Australia each year competes in the National Apprentice Jockey Series, and that's maybe a string of 3 or 4 races around Australia. Might actually be 6 races around Australia, and different jockey goes to each meet representing their state as an apprentice, and whoever gets the most points over the course of that series wins. Well, South Australia have won 8 of the last 15 Apprentice Jockey Series. Last year, they won it with an all-women team. So it underlines to me the incredible influence that women are furnishing upon South Australian racing. We like to talk about the Adelaide Thunderbirds, and they're about to start defending their back-to-back reigning champions title in Super Netball. We talked with James Harris, and we talked about the SA softballers winning the Gillies Shield, and that was just a stunning result. The AFLW, it's the Crows and Port Adelaide both going through to a preliminary final. The Adelaide Strikers have won two of the last 3 Women's Big Bash League titles. I reckon they might all be covered by South Australian women in racing, which I think is pretty incredible. Also note that the Minister for Sport, the Chair of Racing, and the Patron of Racing SA, all women as well.
Now, Hooky, the Sport SA Hall of Fame, word has it that the selection committee has a new chair. Do you have any insight?
Yes, Wallace. I have with much graciousness accepted the role of chair of the Hall of Fame Selection Committee. It's a real honour, to be honest. I'm absolutely delighted. I never coveted the position. Pat Micken, who is a great of South Australian sport and has been the chair of that committee for, I think, about the last 3 years, was offered the presidency of Sport SA, and justifiably so. She is just a giant of sporting administration in my mind. So she is an absolute asset to Sport SA as president. So she vacated the role. I put my hand up, and yes, that role was offered to me in the middle of last month, essentially. I was very happy to accept it. I've got a lot to learn. I say I've got a lot to learn, but in saying that, I will be taking my lead a lot from the way Pat led this committee. She is just someone who I have so much admiration and respect for what she has done, and I'll certainly have learned a lot from her, and I'll continue to seek her counsel throughout the time. If I can just sort of go back to our racing parlance for a minute, you should see the committee. The committee is, just hands down the most incredible list of South Australian sporting either experts or icons you can possibly imagine. From a racing perspective, I feel like I've got Winks, Black Caviar, Farlap, Mackay Diva, and Kingston Town. I mean, there's Bruce McAvaney, there's Anna Mears, Katrina Webb, Mike Sexton, who I reckon maybe knows as much about sport as Bruce McAvaney, and that's quite incredible. And then Michelle Den-Decker, who is an icon of netball and very, very much across sport. If I didn't say Katrina Webb, I should say Katrina Webb as well, who is just a legend of Paralympic sport. So I'm very lucky to be chairing it, but yeah, I don't have a lot to do because all I do is just as a good jockey does, sit aboard an amazing horse and let them stride to victory.
Well, you've been on the committee for a little while, haven't you?
Yeah, I think I've done 4 or 5 years now. I feel like it was around the same time, maybe just before COVID hit. So, 5 or 6 years. So, look, I certainly feel like I'm equipped. I feel like historically I've got good sporting knowledge, and I'm a bit of a historian as well, Wallace. I think it's very easy for someone of my era to really focus in on the people that I saw as I grew up and not go back any further. But I do want to make the effort that we do acknowledge, in particular, women from an era when women's sport wasn't particularly well recognised. And that does take a bit of research and a bit of understanding. So going back beyond, the 1980s, going back to the 60s and 50s and 20s, who were the real pioneering women that allowed, the current crop to have the options in sport that they do today?
Yeah, and I think also, I know having worked with you on this podcast over the last several years, your passion and obviously what you did with the Advertiser was looking at smaller sports too. It's not always the big sports. And I think I remember that the committee a few years back inducted into the Hall of Fame a legendary skater from South Australia.
And it is. We do have a charter, and the brief is very much let's make sure that we cover off as many different eras. We cover gender, and we keep an eye out for Indigenous athletes. That this committee, I think they'll be happy for me to accept that it took a long time for us to induct our first Indigenous athlete. That was Michael Armat, who was inducted in early 2021. And when you think about this committee has been around, the Hall of Fame has been around since 2010, then that probably was something that should have been addressed a little bit sooner. But that's certainly something that we keep very much abreast of now, just to make sure that we have a good spread of gender. We keep an eye out for top-end Paralympic athletes as well as fully able-bodied athletes. All of those things are part of the consideration now. And I think it is great, I guess, from my historical media background, that I did focus in a lot on that sort of stuff, that real sense of diversity and maybe looking beyond what we tend to focus on a little bit too strongly, which is Australian rules football and men's cricket.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, Hooky. I'm sure you do a great job.
Thank you, mate.
Before we go, I just want to touch on the baseball.
Yes.
I've just been chatting with John McClure, the president of Sturt Baseball Club, and he's given me an update on the Division 1 women. We get into the pointy end of the season. This weekend, Adelaide are playing Woodville, and the winner will play Sturt in the grand final. And with the men, both finals, we've got West Torrens versus Sturt, winner into the grand final, and Henley and Grange versus Southern Districts. The winner of that also into the grand final the following week. And all of those...
Needless to say, your mate from Sturt wanted to update us because he might have 2 flags in a couple of weeks' time.
He could very well. He could very well indeed. And it's interesting, we're talking about, the 5-day... it is a 5-day final for the Sheffield Shield, is that right?
Yeah, it will be. And if it's at Adelaide Oval, it'll start on the Monday. If it's not at Adelaide Oval, I think it will start on the Wednesday. So it'll either be Monday the 24th to Friday the 29th. Was that right? Maybe the Friday the 28th, or it'll be 26th to the 30th if it's at Karen Rolton Oval.
Right. So with the baseball, the women will play one game, decide the winner, and each of these semi-finals and also the final series will be best of 3 games. Yeah.
So what is that, sort of 2 Saturday, one Sunday?
Play Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning, and third game, if required, will be on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, and let's make sure we keep a bit of a focus on that. I reckon the tennis finals might already be past us, Wallace. I reckon they were the first week of March. So I reckon we might try and touch on those next week as well. Maybe see if Brianna Hassam can give us a bit of time.
Fantastic. Sounds good, Hooky. Great to have you back.
Good on you, mate.